You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are those of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop. Turn that off. Screeched Lori, primping herself in the bathroom. What the hell is the matter with you? God damn it. I work 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. This is the only day I have off and I'll watch whatever I want. Randy yelled back from his recliner in the living room. Well, I don't want to hear that crap again. You watch that stupid show every week. Hell, it isn't even in color. Lori walked into the living room, dressed to impress in a short skirt and a top that bared her midriff. It was clear she had made an effort, wearing a thong and high heels. Wow, you look great. Where are we going tonight? Randy asked. We aren't going anywhere. I'm going on a girls' night out. I don't know when I'll be back, so don't wait up for me, she said, brushing past him. Randy felt a twinge of frustration. What the hell is up with you? I hardly get to see you during the week. And the one day I'm home you decide to go out. I deserve a day off too, you know, she replied. You think it's easy keeping this place clean while you work? Yeah, I work a bit too. Maybe not 16 hours a day like you, but it's not easy for me either. And besides, you've been sick, remember? I know, Lori said, but it must take a lot of effort to paint those toenails like that. That's right, she huffed. So I'm going out with the girls and I'll be home whenever I want. Just remember one thing, Lori, Randy said, stopping her before she walked out. If I ever find out you're cheating on me, you won't have a home to come back to. Whatever, she said, slamming the door behind her. Randy locked the door, set the deadbolt, put the chain on, and secured the door bolt he had just installed. She'd have a hard time getting back in, assuming she came back at all. He did the same to the back door and made sure all the windows were secured. Grabbing another Coke, he plopped back into his recliner to finish watching a marathon of his favorite show. Screw that lying, cheating, he muttered to himself. He glanced at his watch. 2 hours to go and he'd finally be free of the mess for good. At least that's what he hoped. He looked at the ring on his right index finger with the big blue stone and wished for the best. It hadn't always been like this. Randy met Lori while attending college 12 years ago. After completing his army service, he decided to use his benefits to get a degree in engineering. He met Lori in line at the student union, and they bonded over their mutual tastes in music and movies. They dated, fell in love, and married 2 years after graduating. The first few years were wonderful. They enjoyed a passionate relationship. Randy got a job as a civil engineer at EMX Manufacturing right out of college. Though it was more of a glorified mechanic's position, he was happy to be working, especially with the decent pay and good benefits. Lori struggled to find a position in her field, and ended up working part-time for a local accounting firm. As time went on, however, things began to change. They had discussed having children after 5 or 6 years, but Lori suddenly changed her mind. She became more demanding, and Randy, thinking happy wife, happy life, gave in to her demands more often than not. After a while, Lori began micromanaging everything Randy did, telling him how to mow the yard, what television programs to watch, and even how to hold the tools he had used since he was a teenager. Their intimacy began to fade as well. What had been a daily occurrence turned into maybe once or twice a week, then a few times a month. Lori started going out with the girls on Friday nights. At first, Randy didn't mind since he sometimes went bowling or hunting with the guys. Initially, she would leave right after work and return around 7 or 8 that night, always in a good mood. However, as time went on, Lori began coming home later and later, sometimes not returning until the next day. This naturally angered Randy, and the two would spend the weekends fighting. He also noticed that she had started wearing more revealing clothing on those nights. Her skirts, once fashionably short but modest, had become much shorter, and she often wore shorts that left little to the imagination. If that wasn't troubling enough, Randy occasionally thought he detected signs that Lori had been with someone else. On those nights, she would immediately go into the shower and refuse to let him touch her. Changes at the factory added to his stress as well. The economy wasn't doing well, and several maintenance staff were laid off. Randy, being the local master of all trades, was told he would have to work 16 hours a day 6 days a week, just to keep the plant running. He suggested hiring temporary help, but the plant manager, a burly man who treated employees poorly, shot that idea down. Lori didn't seem to care that Randy was gone so much, and he felt somewhat relieved to be away from her. The overtime was good, even though taxes took a big chunk of his earnings. Nevertheless, he managed to set aside a decent amount just in case. By now, Lori had taken to disparaging him publicly to their friends, claiming he was just a mechanic at a small factory while openly flirting with other men. Her treatment of him grew worse, leading Randy to believe that she might be cheating on him. He considered how he might catch her in the act, but unfortunately, hiring a private investigator or purchasing spy gear was too expensive. One day, while in a stall at work, he overheard a couple of employees discussing a woman who sounded just like Lori. "Did you see the legs on that girl going up to Akers?" one man asked. "Yeah. Do you think she's Akers' new?" the other replied. "Hell yeah. She comes to see him about 3 or 4 times a week, comes in around 3 o'clock and stays until 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Rumor has it she's married to a plant employee, always comes back looking like she's been out all night." Randy decided to keep an eye out for who this woman was and positioned himself to see anyone going up to Akers' office. It took only a day for his efforts to pay off. Sure enough, he saw Lori walking up the stairs to his office, wearing one of her most revealing outfits. She looked around as if searching for someone before entering. Randy watched as 2 of the plant supervisors entered the office. Aker pulled the shades on the door and put up a sign that read, "Meeting in progress. Do not disturb." 3 hours later he saw her leave the office, her hair disheveled and makeup smudged. One of the supervisors followed her out, tucking his shirt into his pants. The reality of her infidelity hit Randy hard and he vowed to seek vengeance. Fed up with her actions and treatment, he seriously considered divorce. He even spoke to a couple of family law attorneys who informed him that in his state he was in a difficult position. He might keep the home he inherited from his parents, but even that wasn't guaranteed. Ultimately, he would lose a significant portion of his income, half of his retirement and possessions, leaving him to struggle while paying for her to pursue her affairs. Because he had no definitive proof of her cheating, he felt powerless. He continued to watch for Lori and spotted her going to Akers' office several more times. He took pictures with his smartphone, but knew they might not hold up in court. Randy decided to confront her about the infidelity, but that backfired. "What were you doing at Akers' office this afternoon?" Randy asked when he got home. "What business is it of yours?" she replied, visibly perturbed. "Are you spying on me now? I couldn't help but see you going into his office, and you certainly weren't dressed for business. If you were with Aker, it's definitely my business." "I won't stay married to someone who cheats," he retorted. "I had to deliver some papers to him," she said defensively. "I didn't see any papers and you sure didn't look like you were dressed for work," Randy replied. "I sometimes have to deliver papers to the plant on my way home from work." "You're making too much of this." After a while, Lori began micromanaging everything Randy did, telling him how to mow the yard, what television programs to watch, and even how to hold the tools he had used since he was a teenager. Their intimate life began to dwindle as well. What had been an everyday occurrence became infrequent, shifting to maybe once or twice a week, then a few times a month. Lori started going out with the girls on Friday nights. At first, Randy didn't mind since he sometimes went bowling or hunting with the guys. Initially, she would leave right after work and return around 7 or 8, always in a good mood. However, as time went on, Lori started coming home later and later, sometimes not returning until the next day. This naturally angered Randy, and the two would spend the weekends fighting. He also noticed that Lori began dressing in more revealing clothing on those nights. Her skirts, once fashionably short, became even shorter, and she started wearing shorts that were quite daring. If that wasn't troubling enough, Randy sometimes thought he detected signs of something more on her skin when she returned home. On those nights, Lori would rush to the shower and refuse to let him touch her. Things at the factory changed as well. The economy wasn't doing well and several maintenance workers were laid off. Randy, being the local master of all trades, was told he would have to work 16-hour days, 6 days a week, just to keep the plant running. He suggested hiring temporary help, but the plant manager, a burly cigar-chomping man with a flat top, dismissed the idea, treating the employees poorly. Lori didn't seem to care about Randy's long hours, and he was somewhat relieved to be away from her. The overtime pay was decent, despite taxes taking a chunk of his earnings, allowing him to set aside some money just in case. By this point, Lori had taken to publicly belittling him to their friends, claiming he was just a mechanic at a low-tier factory, while openly flirting with every man she encountered. Her treatment of him worsened, and he began to suspect she was cheating on him. He considered how he might catch her in the act, but private investigators were too expensive, and the spy gear he thought about purchasing was equally out of reach. One day, while in a stall at work, he overheard a couple of employees discussing someone who sounded just like Lori. "Did you see the legs on that woman going up to Acres?" one man asked. "Yeah. Do you think she's as new?" the other replied. "Hell yeah. She comes to see him about 3 or 4 times a week, always leaving looking disheveled. You know what I mean." The reality of Lori's potential infidelity hit Randy hard, and he vowed to seek revenge. Fed up with her behavior, Randy seriously considered divorce and spoke to a couple of family law attorneys. He learned that in this state he was basically at a disadvantage. He might keep the home he inherited from his parents, but even that wasn't guaranteed. In the end, he would lose about 30% of his income, half of his retirement and possessions, leaving him with little while still supporting her lifestyle. Without definitive proof of her cheating, he had nothing to use against her. Randy continued to observe Lori, and caught her going to see Acres at the plant several more times. He snapped pictures with his smartphone, but he knew they wouldn't hold up as evidence. When he finally confronted her, it backfired. "What were you doing at Acres' office this afternoon?" he asked when she got home. "What business is it of yours?" She replied, visibly perturbed. "Are you spying on me now? I couldn't help but see you going into his office, and you certainly weren't dressed for business. If you were with him, it's my business. I won't be married to someone who cheats." "I had to deliver some papers to him," she insisted. "I didn't see any papers, and you sure didn't look like you were dressed for work." "I sometimes have to deliver papers to the plant on my way home from work." "You're making too much out of this." "I love you and I would never cheat on you," she claimed. "Well, if you really love me, do you think you could treat me a bit better and quit belittling me in public?" he asked. Lori sighed. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was doing that." Randy put his arms around her. "Want to go upstairs and spend some time together?" She shook her head and broke free of his grasp. "Not tonight, I'm a bit tired." That night, Randy stopped at the Dewdrop Inn, a small bar he liked to visit for a beer or two. The bartender, Ryan, asked, "Everything okay?" "Just lovely," Randy replied. "Woman trouble, huh?" Ryan asked, wiping down the bar. "Yeah, you could say that. My wife is, well, let's just say she's been busy with someone else," Randy admitted. Ryan nodded knowingly and opened a drawer under the till, handing Randy a card. "Give this gal a call." Randy looked at the plain white card. It read, "Dr. Ramja." Under the name was a phone number, but no address listed. "Who's this?" Randy asked. Ryan put down his towel and leaned closer. "Remember when I was having trouble with Andrea?" Randy suddenly recalled and nodded. "Wasn't she cheating on you?" "Yeah, she was." "Well, this lady took care of it for me." "What do you mean, took care of it?" Randy asked, concerned. "Oh no, nothing like that. Let's just say the cheating won't be cheating on anyone ever again. She helped me deal with the pain of it all. Still does from time to time. And she's very reasonable," Ryan explained, twisting a ring on his finger. "Call her now if you want." "Right now?" Randy asked. "Sure, why not?" "Here, use my phone," Ryan offered, pulling out his cell. Randy had left his in his truck to avoid calls from Lori. He dialed the number, and a woman answered on the first ring. "Dr. Ramja." "Yes, this is Randy." "Pig," she said, finishing his sentence. "I've been expecting your call. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." Randy was taken aback by her directness. "Where's your office?" "The address is on the card," she replied. Randy checked, and indeed the address was there beneath the number. "How did that happen?" "Are you really a doctor?" he asked. "Of course. I have a PhD in multiple disciplines, and I also have the cure for what currently ails you." Be there at 9 a.m. sharp and bring your phone and your laptop, she instructed before hanging up. Randy was shocked. How did she know who he was? Did you talk to her? Maybe arrange this? He asked Ryan. No, I haven't spoken to her since she helped me with Andrea. Trust me, she's your best shot at dealing with Lori. Randy thanked Ryan, took the card and headed home. Lori was her usual self, lighting into him as soon as he walked in the door. Where the hell were you? She demanded. Why didn't you answer my calls? Ignoring her, he went to their bedroom, wondering if she had entertained her lovers in their bed. The thought sickened him. He changed clothes and returned downstairs. What was that at the plant? Lori pressed. Good question. What were you doing there? Please don't tell me you had to pick up papers for your accounting firm. We have an entire department for that, and since when does your company require you to dress like you're competing in a wet t-shirt contest? He shot back. I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. How I dress is none of your business, she retorted. So tell me, where were you tonight? If you must know, dear, I had a beer at the Dewdrop Inn. Now, I'm going to bed because I'm not feeling well. Working 16 hours a day 6 days a week, to support someone ungrateful like you takes its toll. He went to bed, thinking about the strange call with Dr. Ramja. What kind of name was that? How did she know so much about him? That night he got far less than his usual 5 hours of sleep, and practically had to drag himself out of bed the next day. You look like... Lori said. I'm not surprised. I think I'll go see a doctor today. He picked up his phone and called the plant to inform them he would be gone for an appointment and didn't know how long it would last. Mr. Akers won't be happy, said the bubbly female voice on the other end. Randy recognized it as Angela, a fairly new hire in HR. Yeah, well, if he starts anything, remind him I have over 200 hours of sick time, Randy replied. Angela laughed. You got it, big guy, she said. Dr. Lori, you didn't tell me last night you had an appointment. What's wrong? Well, I didn't think you'd care anyway, considering how you've been treating me lately. I just have something that's been making me feel unwell all the time. Thought maybe I could get an antibiotic or something. Randy didn't like lying, but at this point he really didn't care. Lori played the role of a caring wife, making Randy even more uneasy. Is there anything I can do, baby? She asked. Yeah, Randy thought. Quit messing around and start treating me right. Fat chance of that happening, though. Nah, it doesn't help that I'm working hard, 16 hours a day, to keep a roof over our heads. And it sure doesn't help to see you marching up to Akers' office dressed like you're on spring break. I'm sorry, Randy. I have things to do as well. I do have a job, you know, she said. But it doesn't take 3 hours to hand him some papers, does it? Papers I never see you carrying. Come on, Lori. I'm not stupid. Guys are talking. I hear them all the time. What's going on? He asked. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, he said. She looked at the floor. I can't say anything, she said quietly. Well, understand this. I absolutely will not tolerate a cheating wife. You got that? That means if I ever find out you've been unfaithful to me or anyone else, you're out. Oh, you heard me right. There will be no mercy. No forgiveness. We're done. And whoever is involved will also face consequences. Understand? Randy, please, she began. Shut it. I have to go. My appointment is at 9 and I can't be late. He grabbed his coffee and headed out the door. I love you, Randy, Lori said as he opened the door. He stopped and looked back at her. Yeah, right. Whatever, he replied before leaving. What was that all about? She wondered. Does he know? What will he do? Lori began to get nervous and called Akers. Hey, sweet cheeks. I hear the wimpy guy has a little boo-boo and is going to see the doctor today. Are we on for this afternoon as usual? I have 5 of my supervisors who can't wait to see you. 5 guys, Lori thought, 6 counting Akers. Wow. The thought made her feel a rush of excitement. Yeah. Okay, listen, Ron. I think we may have to cool things down a bit. I think Randy knows what's going on. And he gave me an ultimatum this morning, she said. Don't worry about him. He's too clueless to figure it out. What's he going to do? Run to mommy and pout? Just have that lovely self in my office at 3 like normal, he said. Okay, Lori said quietly. I'll be there. Good. And no undergarments this time. Meanwhile, Randy was making his way to see Dr. Ramja. He found the building listed on the card. It looked like it hadn't been occupied for some time, and weeds were growing up the old brick walls. He drove around back and saw a parking lot with weeds pushing through the cracks in the old pavement. He pulled in and went inside with the bag holding his laptop and tablet, carefully making his way up the creaky old staircase, almost expecting trouble at any moment. He found the door to her suite simply marked Ramnua and went inside. His first reaction was disbelief. A rather attractive young woman with long wavy blonde hair sat behind a computer hooked up to 3 monitors. The room was filled with old books and files reminiscent of something out of an old Gothic horror film. She looked up and motioned him inside. Randy, right on time. Good. I appreciate punctuality. Please come in and have a seat. Randy went inside, closed the door and sat down. Coffee or tea? She asked. Coffee is fine, thank you. He replied. She poured a cup and handed it to him. Black, just the way you like it, she said, smiling. How in the world did she know that? He wondered. He began. Please call me Dr. A. I've been called lots of things over the years. Nemesis, Tyre, just to mention a couple. So Doctor. A will work just fine. Who names their kid Nemesis or Tyre? Randy asked himself, but he kept his thoughts to himself as he knew she was there to help him. Okay, Dr. A. I just want to say thanks for seeing me on such short notice, he said. My pleasure, Randy. It's my job to help those who seek my assistance. You have a problem with your wife, Lori, right? And you believe she's unfaithful? Yeah. How do you know all that? He asked. It's my job to know, Randy, she said, holding a folder. Look around you. I have files covering every marriage on earth. Like this poor guy who thinks his wife is visiting her sister in Paducah. Right now, she's in the middle of a situation in New York. The computer dinged quietly. Oops, the situation just took a turn. She's going to have a hard time explaining that, especially since her husband had a procedure 3 years ago. There's a divorce waiting to happen. So if you know this, why don't you just step in and stop it? Randy asked. Because, Randy, I have a very strict non-intervention policy. I don't get involved unless I'm asked, she explained. But maybe they don't have your number. I can be reached in other ways. I see you're not a very religious person. No, I haven't been to church since I was a kid. Too many hypocrites for my taste. She nodded. I can understand that. There are times, however, when a simple, honest, and heartfelt prayer for help gets across. You'd be amazed. In your case, it was a phone call. So how can you help me? Randy asked. Are you a lawyer, a private investigator, a psychologist? What? And I certainly can't afford much. I've already looked into lawyers and investigators. I am qualified to do all of those jobs. Simply put, I am justice for the wronged. And no one in my crosshairs escapes. No one. As for cost, you need not worry. Why? Randy asked. Simply put, I already have everything I need. And if I don't have it, I get it. No questions asked. So my services to you will cost nothing in terms of money. You will never see a bill from me. Ever. As long as I'm needed on your case, I will be available anytime, day or night. All I ask is that when the time comes, you pay it forward the way Ryan did yesterday, she said. So how can you keep operating? Randy asked. Let's just say I have very deep pockets and leave it at that. Besides, getting justice for those who are wronged is the ultimate satisfaction in my line of work. Look, Randy, you do what you want. But understand that the courts aren't going to work in your favor and you could lose them from your parents, as well as nearly everything you've worked so hard to earn. You don't want that. So do we have a deal? Randy was amazed at what she had just said, but he knew she was right and he couldn't continue to live the way he had been. He extended his hand. You got a deal, Dr. A, he said, shaking her hand. They spent the next several hours reviewing his marriage to Lori, or rather, Randy listened as Dr. A told him about his life with Lori. He learned from her that Lori had been unfaithful to him for the last 2 years. But the worst part began when Ron put him on 16-hour days, which he told him was a setup to make her more available to him and his friends. Girls' Night Out was just a cover for her more questionable activities, which often included multiple partners at the same time. He also learned that she had quit her job with the accounting firm to spend more time with her lovers. 6 months ago, she had gotten pregnant as a result of an encounter with Ron and 3 of his supervisors. Although she had an abortion, the procedure had complications that left her unable to have children. Randy remembered a time when Lori seemed extremely ill but refused his help. Overwhelmed by the pain of Lori's betrayal, he broke down crying. He loved her dearly, worked hard for her and took care of her. And this was how she repaid him. Dr. A paused, walked around, and gently took Randy in her arms to comfort him. The moment she touched him, he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He couldn't explain it. She kissed him lightly on the cheek and wiped a tear from his face. "It's going to be okay, Randy. I know this is hard, but we have to get through it. When we're done, I promise you'll feel much better." He looked at her and nodded. Who was this woman who could alleviate such deep pain with a simple touch? She sat back down and continued reviewing their marriage. "So, Lori meets with Mr. Akers and several of his supervisors at least 3 times a week. They all know she's your wife, by the way. And yes, they're having a good laugh at your expense. They're planning to meet today at the usual time. Oh, and Akers has instructed her not to wear certain undergarments for their afternoon meeting." "What?" Randy exclaimed. "Remember, it's my job," she said, smiling. Randy vowed he would make them all pay, especially Akers. "At this point, we need to gather evidence since I'm sure you want some measure of revenge against the men involved with your wife," she asked. "Don't you have everything in your files? Isn't that enough?" "It's enough for me, and my information is absolutely reliable. Unfortunately, it won't hold up in court. Give me your laptop, your smartphone, and your tablet. I'm going to install something so you can keep a close eye on Lori." Randy watched as she quickly installed the software on his devices. Soon, she had the laptop open to the desktop and pointed to an icon for him to open. It prompted for a password which Dr. A provided. When the application opened, a large window displayed a bird's-eye view of Lori in their bedroom. The audio and video quality was impressive. Lori appeared to be putting her clothes away. Dr. A showed Randy how to maneuver the camera for different angles, even allowing him to zoom in closely.